Hi everyone, welcome to week 11 of English 97. We're finishing up Essay 2 this week, and we're still redrafting, but I wanted to focus our attention a little bit more on editing. So when we edited Essay 1, we focused more on sentence structure and comma use and some of those often errors in our writing. And this time around, I want to talk about the sort of feel or attitude that your writing gives. This is called the style and tone. So let's go ahead and get started. Our assignments for this week are some readings, a couple videos, and then Use What Works Chapter 12. There are some really good exercises for editing related to style and tone in Use What Works Chapter 12. So I highly, highly, highly recommend reading it. And you'll need that for the quiz. And then we'll have a discussion board due Thursday. This is going to be related to an immersive reader tool that there's a video that you're going to watch for that. And then your final draft of this, I believe, is going to be due this coming Monday. All right, so we did a peer review last week, and I've given you guys feedback on your drafts related to revising. This time I want to focus specifically on sentences and the word choice that you use. So let's talk about style and tone for a second. I know how many of you have heard of Langston Hughes. He's a famous poet, and he wrote a poem called A Dream Deferred. If you've ever seen the movie or play A Raisin in the Sun, it is based on his work. So before we talk about what tone or style is, I want you to take a minute to read through this poem and then think about what the tone or feeling of it is. What kind of attitude does it give? And what does it mean to defer a dream? So Hughes wrote, "What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, or fester like a sore, and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat, or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load, or does it explode?" So reading through this, what kind of feeling does it give you? For me, I feel some... When I think of a dream deferred, I definitely don't think it's a good thing. It's talking about having a sore, and that sounds kind of gross, or stinking like meat, or exploding. So it sounds like deferred dreams definitely don't last. So I think that this tone, maybe the attitude here is kind of serious, kind of critical, maybe criticizing those who defer dreams. And I want you to think about the words that he uses to convey this tone. The idea of something drying up in the sun, festering, something that crusts and sugars over. These are intentional words that Hughes uses to sort of convey the feeling in his writing. And although we're not writing poems, you can use the same ideas in editing your own writing. What kind of feeling, attitude are you giving? And is that most appropriate for what you're writing about? So tone and style in your writing, I like to think of similarly to style of your clothing. So your style is kind of the overall how you tend to write. Are you more formal? Are you more informal? And then the tone is a specific piece, the feeling that you give with it. Are you, some examples here, polite, rude, businesslike, friendly? We're writing an argument in our current essay, so maybe you're trying to be persuasive or funny or encouraging or inspirational. These are all different types of tone that you can convey depending on who you're writing to and why you're writing. So when you look at your draft, I want you to ask yourself, what tone are you giving? What feeling does it give? And is that the feeling that you want? Something to think about here is, have you ever gotten a text message or an email maybe that felt like somebody was yelling at you? And you were kind of like, don't type to me in that tone of voice. Or maybe you've heard your mom say that to you, don't talk to me in that tone of voice. You want to be careful with the way that you use your words so that the impression made on your reader is the attitude that you want to have. Sometimes we write angrily or we write in an upset way that conveys a feeling that we really don't want to convey. So the other thing that we're going to focus on this week is sort of making changes based on tone. I think a lot of times, this is a screenshot from your textbook that talks about what to do if you feel like your tone is too informal. I think sometimes we feel like, oh, I write how I speak, or I'm too casual. How do I make myself sound more formal? And here are some tips. You might change from using words like you or we, and then try and use third person. For example, here they changed, you should always charge your phone before going on a long trip, to people going on long trips should recharge their phones before leaving. Third person usually gives a less casual feel. You might think about taking out words like slang, but only if your audience is expecting it. So again, it just depends on how you're writing and who you're writing to. You might avoid asking too many questions, because that can give kind of a conversational feel, like you're talking to someone as opposed to writing to them. And then one easy trick is to write out contractions. So instead of saying there, you might say they are, instead of can't, cannot. These can be quick tips for how to make your writing feel less informal. Although I think the difficulty here is that you don't want to sound the same as everyone else, and to be robotic is not the goal. So just something to think about. Other tips for editing for style is in how you write your full sentences. So tangled sentences are those that are long and often confusing, and this can give that informal style. So let's look at an example here. This student says, a child today often wants his or her first cell phone before facing the first pimple or the first shave, because all of the child's peers seem to have phones, and if technology is a part of being a tween or a teenager today, the child's parents are reminded that every kid just has to have a first phone, even though the child is not sure why the phone is needed right now. Whew, that's a long one. So hopefully you remember from before that your sentences need to have a clear beginning and end, and that if you have more than one independent thought smushed together, you have a run-on. This is an example of a run-on. The easiest way, if you find yourself kind of pushing all your ideas together, the easiest thing to do is to read it out loud, and then you can sort of start to hear where you need to separate your ideas. The immersive reader that we're using this week will also help you to do that. So besides tangled sentences, I want you to also think about the length of your sentences. So sometimes I have students say, oh, my writing feels choppy, or I don't know if it flows well. Well, sometimes that has to do with the length of your sentences. So this is an interesting example here. In the first part, this person, Gary Provost, wrote, this sentence has 5 words. Here are 5 more words. 5-word sentences are fine, but several together become monotonous. Listen to what's happening. The writing is getting boring. The sound of it drones. It's like a stuck record. The ear demands some variety. So what you'll notice is not only is, they're writing in a kind of monotone way, but each of the sentences is that same kind of short. I see this too when students start their sentences with the same idea. One of the videos for this week will help you avoid that. Gary goes on to say, now listen, I vary the sentence length and I create music. Music. The writing sings. It has a pleasant rhythm, a lilt, a harmony. I use short sentences, and I use sentences of medium length. And sometimes, when I'm certain the reader is rested, I will engage him with a sentence of considerable length. A sentence that burns with energy and builds with all the impetus of a crescendo, the roll of the drums, the crash of the cymbals, sounds that say to listen to this, it is important. So write with a combination of short, medium, and long sentences. Create a sound that pleases the reader's ear. Don't just write words. Write music. Ooh, beautiful. So I don't need you to be like Gary and write kind of a song with your writing, but think about the length of your sentences. Do you notice that your sentences are all very short? Or do you have lots of really long sentences? See if you can create a combination of the two. And one of the other things that you want to think about is active and passive voice. So active voice is when you start with the subject, like, I bought some new shoes. This puts the focus on the person, not the action. Passive voice is like this example here. Some new shoes were bought by me. What you'll notice is if you have too much passive voice, the game's being won by our team, James' sister was met by the gate by him, the bus to New York City will be ridden by us. Sometimes it gets confusing what's happening or who's doing the action that's happening. So if you find that you're kind of confused by what you're trying to say, see if you can use more active voice. Start with the subject and then have the action follow after. One of the best ways to edit for mistakes or style or tone is to read your writing out loud. So the tool that we're going to use this week is called an immersive reader. So the video I'm going to post will walk you through how to use this so that the computer will read your writing to you. And you can hopefully start to hear some of these, not mistakes, but some of these areas that we've talked about and how to improve them in your own writing. I'm excited to see how editing goes for you guys, and I will see you online.